Hello, I am Darian Keener, and for the archive assignment, I will be focusing on the images depicted within the books we got to see, and going into detail regarding how these images connect all of these different books. I will be discussing the choice to use color that is seen in the religious texts, and how these images, portrayed in the most lavish fashion possible, compare with the images presented by the scholars of war and history, which are done in black and white. It must be noted that the pages of the specified documents, those being the religious texts from the Levant and the Crusaders' Bible, use a material called vellum, which is treated calfskin as the material within the pages of their books, and then was subsequently bound in leather to become a book. The images depicted in color were originally painted by hand, using pigments that were readily available at the time, though it must be noted that every instance of gold that appears within these books is actually gold leaf, meaning that it is not painted on but rather delicately glued into place. That said, lapis lazuli was used for every instance the deepest shade of blue appears as well. This use of precious materials within these texts, those being skins, gold, and lapis lazuli, indicates the great importance taken in the crafting of these stated texts. This makes sense when you understand that it is the true ruling order of the time, that being the Church, whether Christian, Islamic, or Jewish, are the ones that funded and created these books. The other books I previously mentioned, those being the books on war and history, use black and white ink as their means of decoration and imagery. For these scholars did not have the means to provide resources such as gold leaf and lapis lazuli, and even if they did not deem it prudent to the fact that their books were mass-produced and thus produced for the public, using the printing presses that were available at this time in history. The images within these books were produced using woodcuts. This means a craftsman had to carve an inverse of the image they were paid to represent, meaning the darkest spots within these images had to be the most raised aspects of said woodcut. These images usually use minimal shading, and when it is done by method of hatching or cross-hatching rather than stippling, due to the ease of straight cuts rather than drilled-out holes. Though, despite the difference in color that is represented in both of these separate types of images, the artistic representation of peoples maintain the same style regarding. That is to say, that people are represented in terms of line work and an emphasis on shape rather than the heavy use of shading and coloration to benefit their depictions. This stylistic approach is important to note due to the vast amount of cultures that is intertwined within the creation of these books. That is to say, European, Levant scholar, and religious leader are those that created these books, and thus the style ought to be noticeably different, though it isn't, overwhelmingly so, thus bringing me to the conclusion that those that created the art for these books studied the art of their time and drew inspiration from said art, thus creating art that is similar in the fashion that it chooses to depict people, despite the vast differences between these stated cultures.